It's the presumption that this migration is just like a tsunami. It's a force of nature that we cannot control. We can only work around the edges. But as you say, the solutions are right in front of our face.
There's an instant end to this, which is have the Border Patrol and ICE do what they're supposed to do, close the border, and start building a wall.
Welcome to No Border, No Country. We're talking about New York City today, Matt, and specifically the decline of that city since they've fully embraced these sanctuary policies, and now that the poisonous fruits of that policy are coming to full effect.
Well, what's happened is that Ali Mayorkas, Biden's border henchman.
We've never talked about that guy. Who is he you speak of?
I like to refer to him as the border buffoon. Biden's immigration policies are so lax that it's effectively moved the border. So what's happening is that, Mayor Adams has said, along with a lot of other mayors going back to Ed Koch in New York, we're a sanctuary city. But they've never really had to experience what that means because people came to New York City, but they did it in smaller numbers. They've never experienced what places like San Antonio have experienced. Well, guess what? They've gotten what they wish for, and New York is being treated just like a border city right now, and apparently that doesn't sit well with the mayor, despite the fact that he asked for this.
Yes. So we got some interesting video here. The mayor, Greg Abbott, is really looking exasperated as far as what to do because they asked for this in theory, they got it, and now they're just flummoxed as far as how to deal with it. So he spoke at a town hall recently where he lamented what's going on here and issued this dire warning that got a lot of media attention. So let's watch a little bit of this, and then I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
We turned this city around in 20 months. And then what happened? Started with a madman down in Texas decided he wanted to bus people up to New York City. 110,000 migrants. We have to feed, clothe, house, educate the children, wash their laundry sheets, give them everything they need, health care. And this team here, we stated, let's do everything possible before we have to push it out into neighborhoods and communities. Month after month, I stood up and I said, this is going to come to a neighborhood near you.
Can we pause this?
We're here.
Okay. The first line that caught me is when he used the term madman. He's referring to Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. What constitutes a madman? These are men who have had their states, in particular Texas, overrun. The numbers he stated or he's going to state as far as what New York is absorbing is a fraction of what Texas has been forced to endure. Why is he a madman for offloading some of this humanity that he didn't ask for, but people like Adams did?
Well, he's only a madman because Abbott did what was rational and logical and what should happen in a democratic republic in regards to something that nobody voted on. So the Biden administration said, we don't care about the immigration laws. And all of these states like New York and Massachusetts, California said, we're going to be sanctuaries. We don't care about the immigration laws. We're going to ignore them. Now, putting aside the question of whether you can at will ignore a federal law you don't like, I can just see if, Massachusetts all of a sudden decided to ignore the federal laws against whaling and said that they were a whale sanctuary and sent Captain Ahab out to go start harpooning the great white mammals swimming the ocean off the coast of Massachusetts. The people who think that it's okay to ignore immigration law at will would have a complete meltdown. So just putting that aside, the states along the border, the vast majority of them, excluding California, did not ask for this. And yet they're constantly having to deal with the U.S. government's failure to secure the southern border. And what they finally did, what Florida, which is Florida's not on the border per se, but it's on a maritime border. All these states that have been massive recipients of migration finally said, no, you know what? We've been doing this for a long time. We're sending these people onward to all these other places that have invited people to break the immigration law. And what happened was when Mayor Adams got exactly what he wished for, he doesn't like it.
We're getting no support on this national crisis, and we're receiving no support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this.
Can we stop that for a moment? This is a problem that he doesn't see an ending to because he doesn't want to accept the solution. There's an instant end to this, which is have the Border Patrol and ICE do what they're supposed to do, close the border, and start building the wall that the Trump administration was building. Not too long ago, I, along with a number of other early team members, went to Israel and looked at the Israeli border walls and how those work. There's been a 95% reduction in illegal aliens moving across the Israeli border and in border crime. Now, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't do the same thing. And so when I hear him go, oh, this is a problem that has no ending in sight, this is a problem of his party and people that view the world the way he does, of their own creation. And this could be stopped in a minute. Like that, snap of the fingers.
It's amusing, in a sick way, how these elites sort of wring their hands and just think, what can be done? Mayorkas does this all the time, too. It's the presumption that this migration is just like a tsunami. It's a force of nature that we cannot control. We can only work around the edges. But as you say, the solutions are right in front of our face, starting with enforce the immigration laws on the books. Put a real physical barrier on the border. There are numerous common sense things that could be done. However, it's going to require a law enforcement mindset, a protect America from certain bad things that are coming across our border, not necessarily the good people who are trying to get a job, but all these, the overcrowding, the bills, the housing, all these obligations we take on like they're seeing right now. Deal with it as we got to protect our country from all these bad effects. Enforce the laws on the books. Put a barrier down there. It's not rocket science.
Well, and if you think about what he said when he started, there's a whole lot of hypocrisy going on here because he's like, we have to house, feed, clothe these people, and wash their laundry sheets. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what laundry sheets are, but if these are the migrants that the U.S. so desperately needs because they spur entrepreneurialism, they build the economy, and they make the country better, safer, and stronger, then why is it that we have to take care of them like they're children?
Yes.
That makes no sense whatsoever. And this is very typical of the anti-borders contingent. When it's convenient for them to see migrants as victims, they have no agency and they're just victims of circumstance. But when it's convenient for them to see migrants as triumphal and better, then they possess more agency than anyone else and they can be expected to do better things than anyone else. And the fact is that migrants are just people. Both of those things can't be true at the same time. And none of those things is true of every migrant uniformly.
Yes, if you listen to some of the elites like Nancy Pelosi has said things to this effect that, you know, they're all potential valedictorians and they're all going to be small business owners and things like that. But on the other hand, as you say, they're also these hopeless victims who need cradle-to-grave entitlements. Which one is it?
Right. And as I said, it can't be both at the same time. And the fact is the truth is a little bit different. It's that there are a lot of these people who are never going to be anything close to that. They're people with not a whole lot of education, not a lot of marketable job skills, and it may be 2 or 3 generations before anyone from their families is making a productive contribution to U.S. society and the U.S. economy.
This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. One time we were just in Venezuela. Now we're getting Ecuador. Now we're getting Russian-speaking coming through Mexico. Now we're getting Western Africa. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City. And everyone is saying it's New York City's problem. Every community in this city is going to be impacted. We got a $12 billion deficit that we're going to have to cut. Every service in this city is going to be impacted. All of us. And so I say to you, as I turn it over to you, this is some of the most educated, some of the most knowledgeable, probably more of my commissioners and deputy commissioners and chiefs live in this community. So as you ask me a question about migrants, tell me what role you played. How many of you organized to stop what they're doing to us?
Okay, a lot to unpack right there, my friend. He talks about how they're coming from all these countries you wouldn't expect. Why is that happening? Because our current occupant of the White House, before he got in office, put a giant magnet at the border, and he cranked the power all the way up to max and told people, surge the border, his exact words, and they responded. So let's not get all misty-eyed about why all these people from all these countries are coming. He essentially invited them.
Well, yeah, and the reason you're getting people from West Africa and people from Russia, if you're a Russian between the ages of 18 and 45 right now, and you don't want to go get rained on by cluster munitions in Ukraine, then the first thing you're going to do is make a beeline for the United States. If you're from Ukraine and you want to get rained on by Russian cluster munitions, you're going to make a beeline for the United States. A significant portion of Africa is in the middle of a giant drought. There's economic problems there. But see, this is the problem I have with this. If this is going to destroy New York City, why did he ask for it in the first place? If it's going to impact every single service in the city, and I just read this morning that they're cutting NYPD overtime in order to provide more services to the migrants, then why are they doing this?
Yes. And let's be straight. He is petitioning the White House for a big, fat check. He wants a payoff. How much do you think he's so like the mad prophet walking through the streets warning the city's doomed, we're all in trouble? If the White House cut him a $15 billion check tomorrow, do you think he'd be complaining like this anymore about the destruction of the city?
Well, yeah, he probably would. In typical leftist fashion, he would see that as an opportunity to get more money, so he would complain until they wrote another check. But the part of this that kills me is they're housing these people in luxury hotels, okay? We don't put disabled veterans in luxury hotels, and yet the city of New York is putting recent arrivals from foreign countries in five-star hotels, which they're promptly trashing, and he's complaining that we're not able to do enough for these folks. I mean, you know, the stable was good enough for the Son of Man at Christmas time, and yet some Venezuelans with no job skills who show up here have to be put in the Stewart Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, which, you know, you or I, if we stayed there, would have to pay $500 a night. So this is, you know, if they were serious about being sanctuary cities, then they would have a plan in place to receive people who are coming and seeking sanctuary. And if they were really serious about being fiscally responsible about this, they would not be allowing all of these people to stay in luxury hotels and get 3 meals a day and all of these services that U.S. citizens can't even claim.
Yes. And another factor in all this that I don't hear talked about hardly at all is that he talks about this $12 billion hole this situation has put the city in. These big government progressives who think government is the solution to all things, when they hear $2 billion deficit, what do you think they think of? Now we can raise taxes more. It's an excuse to raise taxes. Mm-hmm. So they will then have succeeded in driving away the few remaining wealthy people who supply the tax base of New York City, drive them out of there, go to Florida or wherever they go, and dooming the city to fiscal hardship into infinity.
Well, he says at the outset in 20 months they turned the city around. I'm not sure what he means that or how they turned it around because, under de Blasio, with all of his socialist policies, the city started to creak. It stopped being safe. They abandoned the Giuliani policing procedures. And I don't know that Adams has done anything to correct any of that. And, the reason that Abbott and DeSantis sent these folks to New York is because New York said, we are a sanctuary city. We welcome them. They didn't send migrants to Montana.
Right.
And if this is what they wanted, well, they've got it now, and they don't like it. And they're finding out that a lot of the things that organizations like Early and FAIR have said about immigration are actually turning out to be true. The crime rate is skyrocketing in New York. They have people everywhere from Staten Island to the Bronx protesting when they're putting migrant shelters in neighborhoods because the crime rates are going up. People are experiencing theft, they're experiencing sexual assaults, they're experiencing public drunkenness. So you might think at some point that some of these Democrat leaders of these blue cities would stop and go, perhaps our stance on this particular aspect of immigration is not correct, and we should adjust it for the greater good of the United States and of the communities that we serve.
The other thing is that he made reference to what they've done to us or something to that effect. The number of people arriving there in the buses, I think, is a fraction of the total amount that's come there in the past and is there now. If you ask these people when they cross over in the Rio Grande there, where do you want to go? I bet a large number of them are going to say New York City because a lot of them probably have friends or family who have been there for a time. So New York's sanctuary preening for all these years is also coming back to haunt it now because they know, the people coming across now, I probably know somebody there. They don't want to go to Montana. They want to go to New York where they know somebody.
Well, there was one of the news channels interviewed a bunch of people hanging out at the Port Authority bus terminal who had just come there. These were not all people that had been sent north by Abbott or DeSantis. A lot of them were people who had come north at their own request and were transported there by the federal government. And when the interviewer asked them, why do you want to go to New York? The individuals said, we want to go to New York because things are better here. There's more opportunities to get a job. There's more services available than there are in Texas, so we would much rather be here. But I also think it's interesting because the way he phrased that, what they've done to us, like they're at odds with the federal government, and this isn't what they have done to us. He's deliberately interfered with ICE's ability to do its job in the city of New York and gladly done so and proclaimed himself a hero for doing it. And now he's going, oh my God, we have an immigration problem. Well, this is what happens if you open the border and you shut down interior enforcement. There is nothing else that can result, and they're seeing what inevitably happens when you take those steps.
How many of you were part of the movement to say, we're seeing what this mayor is trying to do, and they're destroying New York City? It's going to come to your neighborhoods. All of us are going to be impacted by this. I said it last year when we had 15,000, and I'm telling you now with 110,000. The city we knew, we're about to lose.
So, New York City, which has traditionally been a location for migrants, the Statue of Liberty is located there. Ellis Island is in New York Harbor, which was once the major gateway for coming to the United States. And the city that we once knew is about to be lost because of migrants.
Yes. I'm always marveled at that these sanctuary city mayors will lecture us on how immigrants are our strength. Well, or they make us stronger. How strong does New York look right now? Do they look like a powerhouse, or do they look like they're on their hands and knees?
No, New York doesn't look very strong at all. It looks like it doesn't know what to do. And, there's no plan in place for any of this. A significant number of these people are requesting asylum, which when their stories are reviewed, they're not going to be entitled to. and there's no plan in place to rapidly hear these people's claims and to respond appropriately. And so what's going to happen is if a number of these people are denied asylum, then they're just going to be allowed to stay here in limbo without any action being taken, because the federal government is gotten on the same page as the sanctuary cities in terms of immigration policy, which is, it's debatable whether it's even legal for the federal government to proceed in that fashion. And now that they've gotten their wish, the sanctuary cities don't like any of this.
Yeah. I think there should be a caveat to that bumper sticker that immigrants make us stronger. Immigrants make us stronger when it's a very controlled, managed process where assimilation is emphasized, the impact on the country is taken into consideration. When it's done in this sober, adult way, it can be a benefit to this country. But this chaotic, random stampede way that this administration has chosen is the opposite of making us stronger.
Well, immigrants make this country stronger when the immigrants become Americans and behave like Americans. When the immigrants just show up en masse and stay whatever they were beforehand, then the immigrants don't start to look more American. Our country starts to look less American. And you know, to put this in perspective, if all of a sudden, 1 million Germans and 1 million Italians went to France and took up residence there with no plan of leaving, is France going to look like it did before? No, it's definitely not. It's going to start to look more German and more Italian. Now, is that a bad thing if you're a German or an Italian? Who knows? But it's definitely a bad thing if you're a French person who likes being French and likes France being French. And I think the problem that Adams and his ilk have not understood is that the people who are not supporters of unchecked mass migration don't dislike unchecked mass migration because they are racist or because they don't like immigrants. It's because they do like the United States and they want to see the character and tenor of the United States stay the same. One of the reasons they want to see it stay the same is that has traditionally been good for immigrants. If immigrants all want to be here because this is such a great country, then they should want to assimilate, because if they make the U.S. into whatever it is they just left, why would they want to be here since they left what they had behind?
I'm Tom Homan. The Biden administration is reversing America's progress on immigration, reversing ICE's ability to deport criminal illegal aliens, reversing job protections for Americans, and construction of the wall. That's why I've joined EARLY, the Immigration Reform Law Institute. EARLY uses the courts to stop bad immigration policies. Join me. Support EARLY at early.org. Help win the immigration fight in the courtroom. Paid for by the Immigration Reform Law Institute.
Welcome back to No Border, No Country. So, Brian, we've been talking about Mayor Adams' rant, where he actually sounds like a Republican border hawk, complaining that the number of migrants coming to New York City are going to destroy the city as New York knows it. Now, you recently published a blog on this very issue, which I believe appeared in Center Square and then got picked up by the DC Examiner.
Yes, and it was asking the question, can we finally admit that sanctuary cities are a failed experiment? And it ties in nicely with what we just discussed, because we've been doing this sanctuary experiment since the 1970s. That's when it originated. And we've got lots of evidence now to evaluate it and look at it like an experiment. How has it worked out? And another thing I cited in that piece is that former Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis was famously quoted as referring to states as laboratories where they can test policies that maybe the whole country doesn't want to take on, but yet we can examine these as case studies and see how they worked out. Well, this is a perfect example of that, because we have New York City, we have Los Angeles, San Francisco, all these places, states and counties as well, that have tried this. And we can really look at the evidence now and say, how has it gone? And the incontrovertible conclusion is that it is a colossal failure.
Well, it was kind of ironic because Brandeis was addressing that in the context of a case that had to do with states' rights. Yeah. And he was clarifying that under a federal system, the federal government has certain responsibilities that are enumerated in the Constitution. Everything else belongs to the states. So that leaves states free to attempt to do things addressing public safety issues, addressing economic issues that other states are not bound to follow. The interesting thing is this experiment has taken place in the context of a federal law that, according to United States v. Arizona, Supreme Court holding, the states have very little room to legislate or to take any action in. And yet the states have just ignored immigration law at will.
Yeah, and again, we talked about Adams. They asked for this. They never said, we're a sanctuary city and we want to take on 10,000 new arrivals. They never specified numbers. They said, we're a welcoming city. We welcome all. And they got all, and now they're crying foul. Well, you said you can do this. You said to exclude anyone was xenophobic. And now you're taking the xenophobic stance because you've come to see what we've been warning about all these years, that it's not sustainable?
Well, and this is interesting because, sanctuary cities have to do with illegal aliens and people who have violated their status and become illegal aliens by not complying with the terms of their admission to the United States. And Adams is ranting about this, just talking about migrants. So where does New York City stand with regard to people who are lawfully in the United States and, our H-1B workers with tech companies, or our people with green cards that are seeking to move to New York City? That's the other thing that's sort of mind-boggling about this. If you're here illegally, New York's going to take care of you. They're going to feed you, they're going to house you, and they're going to do your laundry sheets.
Right. Well,
if you're legally here...
People have been saying for some time now, ringing the warning bell, saying that what they're doing is blurring that line between legal and illegal immigration. We are arriving at the point now where they're not blurring the line, they're eliminating the line. So that why would someone jump through all the hoops to become a legal citizen, which a lot of people do, but they've got to look at it on a cost-benefit analysis and say, I spent all this money on legal fees and doing all these things, and this guy just walked right in and he's getting all these benefits. Why don't I just go that route?
Well, I take it a step further. I think they're erasing any distinction between United States citizens and people who are foreign nationals, whether they're here legally or illegally. I mean, the only major difference between foreign nationals and U.S. citizens at the current point is U.S. citizens can vote lawfully and they can serve in the military as officers. But the reality is, and I did work on this with my colleague Spencer Raley when I was the research director at FAIR, you have huge numbers of people who are in the United States legally or illegally who are not U.S. nationals that wind up voting, and a lot of them do it because they've been misled by state governments through the motor voter, get a license, get registered to vote. They get a voter registration document in the mail and go, oh, hey, I must be able to vote. And they go out and vote, even though they're not citizens, and even though in a number of cases they're not here lawfully at all. It's mind-boggling.
It's also interesting to point out that in response to this, certain people in this country have come up with the idea, well, if you're going to have a geographic area, a jurisdiction that you're going to say is a sanctuary against immigration policy, federal immigration policy, well, we want to start a jurisdiction that's a Second Amendment sanctuary, that the federal laws won't apply. And the same people that push for immigration sanctuary cities say, you can't do that. What are you talking about? So there's a hypocrisy there, too. They want to flout federal law when it serves their agenda, but not when it serves anyone else's.
Well, it's a mind-blowing hypocrisy, too, because the Second Amendment is a fundamental right. That's why it's in the Bill of Rights. That's what all of those amendments are. There's no fundamental right for a foreign national to migrate to the United States, and there's no fundamental right for a U.S. citizen who has foreign relatives to be able to get them admitted to the United States.
Yeah. And several episodes ago, we had Pastor David Lowry on from Chicago, and we showed him some clips of these town halls that have been taking place in Chicago, and which continue to this day. They're still going on. And doesn't it give you a sense that is what the founding fathers sort of envisioned, that the people are holding the officials accountable to the people? Because you're seeing some real displeasure there, some anger being directed at these people, that why are the citizens of this city being forced to the back of the line when it comes to prioritization from the city as far as resources for people that, as we've said many times, got here 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, I mean, Pastor Lowry, hit the nail on the head. And I think one of the things, I'm not sure if he said it in the podcast or in his discussions with you and I in between the segments, but he pointed out these are schools that were mothballed because Chicago said it didn't have enough money to keep them open, that are now being used as migrant shelters. And a lot of people at those town meetings, Pastor Lowry pointed this out, said, if you don't have the money to keep these schools open for children in Chicago who have a right to a free public education, where are you finding the money to open these as migrant shelters?
Right. And another thing that I cited in that piece is that these polls are coming out now for New York State residents, showing that, not surprisingly, the tide is turning in public opinion there as far as have we done enough for these arrivals? Should we take on any more? Is the border a serious problem? These opinions are swinging from what they were several years ago. People are getting very alarmed in this very blue, very progressive state. So, again, at what point do we reevaluate and say, this is not working, this is a disaster? I wonder if they put it to the people in New York today, would you like to rescind the sanctuary laws in this state? I don't think the proponents want to take that vote right now.
No, I don't think they do. And I think that, the problem with this is, even if for some reason Adams and other similarly situated mayors, governors, county executives have a come to Jesus moment and decide, I can't support the sanctuary stuff anymore, it's inconsistent with what I believe about how the border and immigration should be run, they're not going to be able to change it, because there's no adult supervision at the border right now, because we got Mushbrain Joe and Allie the border buffoon in charge of our immigration policy. And I hate to make fun of anyone dealing with dementia, but I think we all saw the president at the summit in Vietnam, and it was pretty clear that he didn't know what was going on. So it makes me wonder who's making these decisions about the border. And Ali Mayorkas clearly is not interested in obeying U.S. immigration law, because he's abandoned the Immigration and Nationality Act and basically imposed Ali's version on the United States. And that's not the way government in the U.S. is supposed to work. The government is bound by the laws just like every single citizen is.
Right. Now, let's wrap this up here, because we could talk about this for hours. But one of the things that I get asked all the time, whether it's online, on social media, or through people contact me here via email, or people I just know, they all admit this is a problem. It's clearly we're off the rails at this point as far as immigration policy. People say, what can we do? What can we do? The obvious question is replace the people in office right now, but it seems like there should be more than that. What can people do? Throw our audience a lifeline. These people who are exasperated, what can they do?
Well, I think they can make their exasperation known. That's a fundamental cornerstone of American government is the right to seek redress of grievances. And I think there were two gentlemen, I can't remember their name, who wrote a great book called The Dictator's Handbook. And basically they said that even someone like Joseph Stalin or Mussolini was beholden to some kind of a constituency in their country that they had to answer to. And that the way they kept in power was the same way that politicians in democratic societies keep in power is by responding to the needs and wants of the constituency. The difference is when you're in a democratic republic, the constituencies are bigger and there are many more of them. And so I think that what folks in Washington need to hear is this is not the way we want the border to be run, and we expect Congress or the president or somebody to do something about this. And the only way that that message is going to get across is if the mailroom at the Capitol looks like the mailroom in Miracle on 34th Street with all the letters to Santa Claus. If they have letters like that saying, fix the damn border because we don't want the U.S. to be run like this, I think then maybe people are going to start reacting. I mean, we're already at a point where I think I read this morning that 103 Democrats have actually stood up on the Hill and said, this immigration situation has gotten out of hand. We're not complying with the laws of the U.S. anymore.
It seems like we're in such a desperate position now, and all of the above approach is required. It's letters, it's phone calls, it's emails, it's attendance at town halls, it's everything, because there's a tendency on the people who support law enforcement side to be more live and let live. Well, I'm not an activist, someone else will deal with that, I'm busy, I got a family, and you do. However, more is required of us as citizens now.
Well, nobody has to be an activist, but we all have to be citizens. And so I think that we need to hold our elected leaders accountable. We should also be holding the media accountable. There's a significant portion of the media that's not providing any coverage on this. And if viewers start asking for media coverage on this, then the media outlets really should be responding to that. And, if people started turning off the stations that don't cover these things, that don't provide information, then they take a hit in the Nielsen ratings, and people are voting on the content on those news platforms with their on-off switch.
Yeah. Another thing I would say to people that say, I just don't have the time, support organizations that do the legwork. The Immigration Reform Law Institute is a perfect example of that.
Exactly.
Talk a little bit briefly before we wrap up, Judge Matt O'Brien. What efforts are Early doing on the ground to help defend the rights of Americans in this situation?
Well, Early is the only public interest law firm on this side of the issue. And so we have been tackling everything from the D.C. proposal to let illegal aliens vote in federal elections, to things like the border wall, Title 42, issues having to do with Americans needing to be vaccinated versus illegal aliens being allowed to come into the country without any vaccinations. You name it, Early's been in the middle of it. And what we do is a very talented team of litigators here takes a look at these cases. Where we are not a direct party to the litigation, we often put in friend of the court briefs, which are known as amicus briefs. And when a client comes to us and asks for our help, and we become directly involved in a case, well, then we actually make the arguments that people hear us making here on this podcast to judges in federal courts, in order to try and make the government comply with the Constitution and with the Immigration and Nationality Act. This is Matt O'Brien for No Border, No Country. Thank you for hanging with us till the end of this episode. If you would like to support No Border, No Country or the general mission of Early, please go to www.early.org/podcast. In addition, if you want to catch other episodes of this podcast, you can find them on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Thanks again. Please stab the like button and subscribe.